its main idea is that the free market fails to deliver a press that is truly representative or even truly independent of government, whereas public service broadcasting provides more impartial news, higher quality content, and serves the nation better. Yes, the British press is different from the press in America. In America, the press has dispersed shareholdings and they don't have dominant shareholders. In Britain, we have dominant shareholders who control the press in large groups, and the people they appoint are the dominant influence shaping journalism. So the reason why our press is different from the American press is we have a different pattern of ownership. Well, one example is that all Murdoch's newspapers all around the world supported the Iraq War. That's over 150 newspapers. Another example is a case study in which Murdoch acquired the Sunday Times. And I interviewed a large number of journalists who worked at the Sunday Times during that period. And they described the way in which they were bullied, harassed, intimidated, sacked, or pushed out. So the Sunday Times, that had been a liberal conservative paper, became a radical right paper, in which the newsroom culture was re-engineered. So it ceased to be necessary for Murdoch to intervene in the Sunday Times because its compass settings had been changed. Well, one of the things it did was to look at the rise of the new right journalism, and in particular the campaigns that were run. Campaigns against Muslims, who were portrayed as being a security threat, socially repressive, alien. Campaigns against migrants, who were portrayed as importing crime, taking British jobs, and again being an alien presence. Campaigns against the quote undeserving poor, who were portrayed as being dodging work, idle, and a burden to strivers, the hard-working taxpayer. So that was one news stream. And another stream was looking at the moral decline of the press since 1980. We got to a situation now where the British press is the second least trusted press after 28 countries in Europe. It's even more distrusted by its readers than the press in Serbia. Why? The explanation is partly the economic collapse of the press, creating terrific pressure to find stories that would retain readers, and partly was pressure from new owners. It resulted in phone hacking, that is the interception of voicemail. It resulted in totally ruthless extraction of stories. A young woman will be confronted with, if you cooperate, we'll make you look good, but if you don't, we'll make you look really bad. That kind of strategy for getting excellent human interest stories. And lastly, totally irresponsible journalism. I mean, the campaign against the triple vaccine led to a reduction in the take-up of the vaccine and damaged public health. And there was absolutely no justification for the campaign, apart from the fact it sold more copies. So those are some of the things that the new edition looks into. The major groups is firstly the Mail group controlled by Viscount Rothermere, and the person he appoints is the dominant controller of the Mail group. Murdoch controls the other major group, and he is very much a dominant old-style proprietor. And the third major group is the Trinity Mirror group, which doesn't have a dominant shareholding and is the only popular newspaper on the left. Evidence shows that legacy media, which seem to be in decline, actually cast a long shadow. Large numbers of people access newspaper content and also television content through the internet. So it's still influential, even if its direct audience is declining. We're living through half a revolution. There are some things that haven't changed very much, like the ownership of large groups, the logic of profit, but there are other things that have really changed. One of the key changes that took place in journalism, in the press, but also broadcasting, was a celebration of the free market. The argument that prosperity will be greatly increased if the state shrinks, if the market is deregulated, and if taxation is lowered. And this became the leading orthodoxy for the entire period from 1980 up to the pandemic. Now, of course, with the pandemic, with a command and control state, a state that's a big spender, there will be a debate within the political elite as to whether free market policies or a more economic activist policy that stimulates demand, that invests in new industry, which is the best path to follow. So I think reporting will change as a consequence of the pandemic. I think the media matter in terms of shaping our perception of the world. It's influential in terms of framing our understanding of the world. It matters because politicians think the media matter, and it has a direct impact on politicians. So in multiple ways, the media are a formative influence in our lives. Well, media regulation ensures that we have a supply of impartial news. It ensures that the media are committed, that is, public service broadcasting is committed to informing the public. That means that news and current affairs is shown more or less in prime time, in contrast to America, where it's on the very margins. It ensures that there is a commitment to quality. It makes for a system that serves the public better than our press. Well, there's been very strong pressure for less regulation and strong pressure for public services to be marketized. And the BBC and Channel 4 have been subject to increased pressure to provide, quote, value for money. That's affected how innovative and how courageous it is. And by and large, this pressure has been harmful. The media, well, the press and television are different. The press used to be in-your-face racist. For example, the News of the World, then the biggest circulation Sunday paper, ran an editorial in the 60s saying, we can take no more coloured people. It'll be madness to do so. That kind of editorial is not acceptable now. But there's a kind of covert racism. It's expressed in hostility towards Muslims who are presented as being a security threat and different from other people. It's expressed in a kind of a cultural narrative of black youth as being criminalized and a threat. So it's not as in your face as it used to be, but it's still there. During the 1950s, there was a popular press campaign against, quote, these evil men, referring to homosexuals, who were portrayed as being disposed to be paedophiles and also a security threat. And the solution, in the view of the Sunday Pictorial, was detention and chemical castration. The evil men campaign ran for much of the 50s. There was a thaw. And then during the 1980s, there was a panic about AIDS. And the biggest circulation paper, The Sun, even had an article offering a one-way ticket to gay men, and we will pay as long as they stayed in Norway and didn't come back. That is contrasted with the almost lyrical way in which The Sun reported Elton John's same-sex marriage. So there's been a profound shift in the representation of sexual minorities in the British press in the last 50 years. In terms of sexuality, it looked like the abandonment of page 3 in The Sun represented a watershed, but it didn't. It was replaced by articles like a range of semi-nude bottoms, and the task for the reader was to say which fitted the right fit celeb, or readers asked to send in the pictures of best breasts, and readers determining which breasts they thought were best. A continuation of the objectification of women. So in relation to sexual minorities, a big change. In relation to the objectification of women in tabloid journalism, not much change.